I should have clocked it the moment he laughed. Not because I'm sensitive. Because in corporate life, the people who mock your degree aren't joking. They're testing where you sit in the food chain. And I had spent years building systems that didn't break, just for a guy like Nolan to treat it like a punchline. He said it in a conference room in front of my team like it was harmless. I smiled like it didn't matter. Then he shipped a quick fix during a release freeze to prove he was smarter than process. By midnight, our dashboards were screaming. And by the time the incident hit 1.2 million in exposure, the system didn't list Nolan as the owner. It listed me. I never planned to become the reliability guy. I just became the guy who stayed when everyone else went home. Mid-sized fintech. We handled payroll runs, vendor payouts, time-sensitive transfers for businesses that didn't have patience for mistakes. The company loved to say we move fast. The truth was we moved fast until something cost money, then we moved blame. I didn't come from a place that impressed people on LinkedIn. Community college, state school, night classes, a degree in information systems that I was proud of, mostly because I earned it the hard way. Nolan walked in like he'd been born in a boardroom. He was hired as a senior engineer, same title as me somehow. 6 months after I'd taken over half the on-call load. Ivy League, smooth talker. The kind of confidence that doesn't come from skill, but from never being punished for arrogance. The first time he saw the diploma frame on my desk, he stopped like it offended him. Information systems, he read out loud. Then he looked up at me, smiling. So, spreadsheets with feelings. A couple people laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was safe. They were signaling they weren't on my side. I kept my face neutral. It's been paying my mortgage, so I'm a fan. Nolan's smile didn't change, but his eyes did. He wasn't trying to be witty. He was trying to establish something, that my background made me small. And the stupid part is, it worked for a second. I felt heat in my neck. Not anger. Embarrassment. The old kind. The kind you get when you realize you're still the kid who had to prove he belonged. I didn't say anything else. I went back to work. Because what do you do with someone like Nolan? You outlast them. You let results speak. You let the systems run. Except Nolan didn't want results to speak. He wanted a stage. Our team had a problem we all knew about. A rare bug in our payout service where, under heavy load, a retry could create a duplicate payout request. It didn't happen often, but when it did, it was loud. We had controls in place, rate limits, an extra idempotency check, monitoring thresholds. Not perfect, but contained. We had a proper fix planned for the next sprint. It needed review, security sign-off, and a staged rollout, because it touched the deduplication layer, the part of the system that decides whether money is leaving once or twice. The kind of code you do not touch casually. That week, we were in a release freeze, end of quarter, audit window, high transaction volume. Leadership had made the usual speech. No unplanned production changes. Stability first, which in our company translated to, if anything breaks, we will be furious. Late afternoon, Nolan dropped a message in the engineering channel. Found root cause in dedupe logic. Easy fix. Can deploy tonight and stop babysitting retrees. I stared at the message longer than I should have. It wasn't just the claim. It was the tone. Like the rest of us were idiots for not doing it already. I replied publicly, polite, but firm. Not during freeze. Put it behind a flag, open a change ticket, get review. We ship after quarter, close. A few minutes later, Nolan messaged me directly. You're being risk-averse because you don't understand the code. Let me handle it. There it was again. Same move as the degree joke. The insult packaged as confidence. I typed back carefully. Follow process. If you think it's urgent, open an emergency change with justification. Otherwise, it waits. He left me on red. I should have escalated right then. Told my manager, flagged security, done something official. But I didn't. Because I didn't want to look paranoid. And because in most workplaces, the person who complains first looks like the problem. until it's too late. That night, I was home on my couch with my laptop open, half watching a game, half watching our dashboards. I wasn't anxious. I was trained. When you've been on call long enough, you don't relax during a freeze week. You just pretend you do. At around 9, the first alert hit my phone. Payout API latency spike. Then another. Error rate climbing. And then the one that made my stomach drop. Anomaly detection on payout volume. Requests exceeding baseline. I sat up. The room felt suddenly too quiet. I opened logs. It wasn't the old pattern. This wasn't a rare edge case creating one duplicate. This was a system generating duplicates fast. Like something had changed how the service defined duplicate in the first place. I pinged the on-call engineer, opened a war room, tagged incident commander, and then I checked the deployment feed. There it was. A production deploy, less than an hour earlier. No scheduled window. No linked release ticket. Just a pipeline run and a commit hash. My throat tightened as I clicked the metadata. The system automatically stamped the service owner on the change record. And under that field, clean as a signature, was my team. My name. Like I'd approved it. Like I'd asked for it. Like I'd been the one to push the button. I stared at it while new alerts kept firing, and then Nolan joined the war room, calm like he'd been waiting for it. "I saw the alerts," he said. "I'm looking." I didn't respond right away. I was too busy trying to keep money from leaving the building. But in my head, one thought hardened into something I couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't just a bad deploy. This was Nolan proving a point. And he'd made sure, on paper, that the consequences would land on me. The next 40 minutes were the kind you don't remember as a timeline. You remember them as sensations. The cold in your hands, the dry mouth, the way your eyes stop blinking because you're reading faster than your brain can process. We throttled intake first, then we killed the retry workers, then we isolated the payout queue. But the alerts kept coming, because whatever Nolan touched wasn't a feature you could simply flip off. It was the deduplication layer, the part of the system that decides whether a payout request is new or already processed. And if that layer lies, money leaves twice. I didn't know it yet, but the worst part wouldn't be the incident. The worst part would be the morning after, when he tried to make me sign the story. By 10, our war room had 12 people in it. On-call engineers, an incident commander, someone from payments ops, and a manager who looked like he'd been dragged out of bed. Nolan was still calm. Calm is a weapon when you're trying to look innocent. "What's the impact?" the incident commander asked. Ops answered, voice tight. "We have duplicate payout attempts. Some are blocked, some are pending. Clients are starting to notice." I pulled up the internal exposure dashboard finance uses during incidents. It didn't show loss, it showed risk. The number wasn't just a number, it was the amount of money we might have to eat, in credits, penalties, and chargebacks depending on what cleared. It climbed in steps, like a heartbeat. 6 figures, then more. Then it slowed, then surged again when retries multiplied. I forced myself to keep my voice even. "We need rollback, now." The incident commander asked, "Can we roll back safely?" I checked the build history. Yes, last stable build is from yesterday. The deploy was less than an hour ago. Nolan spoke up. Rollback might reintroduce the old duplicate issue. My change was meant to stop it. I stared at the logs on my screen and said, "Your change is creating duplicates at scale." He didn't flinch. "Correlation isn't causation." That sentence told me everything. When someone is more concerned with framing than fixing, they're not on the same team as you. The incident commander cut in. "We need stabilization first. Rollback." Nolan sighed, as if we were inconveniencing him. We initiated rollback. Our pipeline pushed the previous build. The services began to restart, and slowly, painfully, latency started to drop. Error rates eased. The duplicate spikes didn't stop immediately because queues and retries were still draining, but the bleeding slowed. That's when Nolan tried to wedge himself into the hero role. "I can hot patch the dedupe key generator," he said. "Just a small adjustment," I said. "No more changes. We're in containment. Every minute you touch prod, you widen the blast radius." He looked at me like I'd insulted him. "You're overreacting." The incident commander backed me. "No more deployments. We do this clean." Nolan went quiet, but I could feel it. He wasn't quiet because he agreed. He was quiet because he was waiting for the moment he could reshape the narrative. By midnight, the incident was under control. That's the phrase managers use when the dashboard stops panicking and they can breathe again. We still had fallout, duplicate notifications, tickets in the support queue, pending payouts that needed review, angry clients who didn't care about our engineering philosophy. We ended the call with action items: client communications, reconciliation, and a post-mortem meeting in the morning. I closed my laptop and sat in silence for a long time. My wife came into the room and asked, "Is everything okay?" I almost told her no. Almost told her we might have just lit $1 million match. But I heard myself say, "It's handled," because that's what people like me do. We take chaos, make it smaller, and then carry it alone. The post-mortem meeting invite hit my calendar at 6 a.m. Rapid alignment, payout incident, no agenda. Just a list of names that told me exactly what this was. Leadership was nervous. When I joined the call, Nolan already had his camera on. He looked rested, like he'd slept just fine. Claire, my manager, joined next. Her face was tight, professional. She gave me a quick look that said, "Don't make this worse." Executives arrived one by one. Finance, product, a VP who only shows up when money is involved. The VP started. "We need to understand what happened, and we need to understand who owns it." Owns it? He didn't say, "How do we prevent it?" He didn't say, "How do we support the team?" He said the quiet part out loud. "Whose neck is this?" Nolan spoke first. "I'll summarize," he said smoothly. "We had a weakness in the legacy dedupe logic. Under load, it caused inconsistent idempotency behavior. I implemented a correction to reduce client pain, but the system reacted unexpectedly due to insufficient safeguards. It was beautifully constructed. He made it sound like the system was the villain, and he was the doctor performing emergency surgery. Then he said, "There's also a process issue. We don't move urgently enough on reliability risks." And then, almost casually, he added, "I flagged this, but change management is slow." I watched Claire's face as he said it. She didn't interrupt. She let him talk. The VP asked, "Who approved the deployment during freeze?" Nolan tilted his head like it was complicated. "The pipeline is automated. The service owner is accountable for deployments. I assumed we had coverage given the severity." My stomach turned. He wasn't saying I deployed it. He was saying the owner owns it, and the owner field, by design, was my team. My name. The VP looked at me. "Is that accurate?" I could feel the entire call waiting for my answer, and I understood the trap. If I said no, that's not accurate, I'd sound defensive. If I stayed quiet, I'd accept the blame. So I chose a third option. I kept my tone calm, almost dull. "I did not approve an emergency deployment. I explicitly asked Nolan to follow process and wait until freeze ended. If an emergency path was used, it should have a documented reason and approvals." Nolan smiled slightly. "I believe we're getting lost in semantics. The goal is protecting clients." The VP's eyes narrowed. "Did you deploy using an emergency mechanism?" Nolan answered without blinking. "I deployed to mitigate a known risk." That wasn't yes. That wasn't no. It was a politician's sentence. Claire finally spoke. "Let's not escalate. We need solutions." And right there, I realized something worse than the incident itself. My manager wasn't interested in truth. She was interested in calm. And calm in corporate life is often purchased by sacrificing the person least likely to fight back. After the call, Claire messaged me, "Can you hop on a quick one-on-one?" I joined. She didn't waste time. "We need to close the postmortem quickly." she said. Leadership needs accountability. I asked, accountability for what? For the change controls gap, she said. As service owner, it ultimately falls on your org. There it was, clean, quiet, and sharp. They weren't asking what happened. They were deciding what the story would be. And in that story, Nolan was a high performer who moved fast. And I was a process guy whose name happened to be stamped on the service. I stared at my screen and realized my entire career at this company had just become one decision. Do I let them write my name under someone else's mistake? Or do I prove, with evidence, that the system remembers who pressed the button? I didn't sleep. Not the dramatic kind where you stare at the ceiling thinking about your childhood. The practical kind, waking up every 20 minutes to check whether money cleared, whether a client escalated, whether someone had already rewritten the story while I was offline. By morning, support tickets were stacked, finance was running reconciliations, and leadership was already talking about closing the post-mortem. Closing it, like it was a door they could shut before anyone looked inside. I opened the draft post-mortem and scrolled to the section titled Change Authorization. My name was there in plain language, implied, not directly stated, but written in a way that would read like admission if anyone external ever asked. I didn't feel angry at first. I felt something worse, clarity. Because I realized Nolan wasn't the biggest risk in that room. The bigger risk was how easily the company was willing to make a convenient record. I went quiet on purpose. No Slack arguments, no emotional messages, no, this is unfair. That only makes you look unstable, and unstable people are easy to sideline. Instead, I did what I've always done when a system breaks. I pulled the artifacts. Our environment logs, deployments in multiple places. That's the trade-off of being regulated. You can't hide a change, but you can drown it in noise if nobody knows where to look. I started with the source repository. Nolan's commit message said something like dedupe correction. The diff was small enough to look harmless, but not small enough to be safe. He didn't just fix a bug. He changed how the service generated the idempotency key, the fingerprint that tells the system, this payout request is the same as one we've already seen. He shortened it, he simplified it, he reduced the data it used. And I could tell exactly why, because I've seen this kind of ego before. He wanted to be clever. He wanted to remove unnecessary complexity. He wanted to prove his instincts were better than process. Under low volume, it might have looked fine. Under end-of-quarter load, collisions become real. Different payout requests can look identical to a simplified key. The service starts making the wrong decision, and the wrong decision is money. Then I checked how it got into production. There was no pull request in the normal queue, no review comments, no approvals, no evidence of our standard merge path. That meant one of two things. Either he used a bypass or someone with admin privileges helped him bypass. Both were bad. So I moved to the build pipeline history. The deployment that triggered the incident wasn't the scheduled release job. It was a manual run. And it didn't just run during freeze. It skipped the freeze gate entirely. The freeze gate isn't a suggestion. It's a control. Bypassing it requires a permission group we keep tight. Emergency deploy access. I opened the identity logs and searched the timestamp. There it was. An emergency token issued to Nolan's account minutes before the deploy. The access reason field was blank. That detail mattered more than people realize. In a real emergency, you document why you're breaking glass, because you expect auditors to read it later. Leaving it blank isn't forgetfulness, it's confidence that nobody will check. I took screenshots, not sloppy, cropped out of context screenshots. Full page, time-stamped, with the identifiers visible. I pulled the pipeline run ID, the token issuance event, the commit hash, and the actor identity. Then I did something I'd been avoiding since the moment Nolan mocked my degree. I stopped trying to win inside engineering politics and started treating this like an audit. That shift was my first relief, a small one, but real. Because facts don't care who's well regarded. That night, I stopped being the hero who fixes everything quietly. I became the guy who documents everything loudly enough that it can't be buried. The next question was where to take it. HR would turn it into a feelings conversation. My manager would turn it into a team alignment. Leadership would turn it into lessons learned and move on. Security and compliance couldn't. In a regulated company, security doesn't negotiate with charisma. Compliance doesn't accept "I was trying to help" as a control. I booked a short meeting with Priya, our security lead. Neutral title, neutral tone. I didn't accuse anyone. I asked for validation. "I need to correct the record," I said. "An emergency deployment occurred during freeze. The post-mortem implies authorization that didn't happen. Can you confirm the emergency path usage in the actor?" Priya asked for identifiers, nothing else. "Token event, pipeline run, commit hash." I sent them. She didn't respond immediately, and that short silence made my stomach tighten again. Not because I thought I was wrong, but because I knew what this would trigger if I was right. Then her message came through. "Confirmed. Emergency token issued to Nolan. Manual pipeline run. Freeze gate bypassed. No documented justification. You are not listed as approver." I stared at the screen for a long moment, not because I felt victorious, because something inside me unclenched. For the first time since the alerts hit, I wasn't fighting a story. I was holding a verified timeline. I thanked her, kept it short. Then I went back to the postmortem draft and opened the edit history. I expected Nolan to be the one who wrote that change authorization language. He wasn't. The edit came from Claire, my manager, a clean insertion written in managerial voice, soft, vague, designed to distribute blame without saying it directly. The kind of sentence that reads harmless until it's used against you in a performance review, or pulled by auditors months later. And in that moment, the emotional color of everything changed. This wasn't just Nolan being reckless. This was leadership choosing convenience over truth. I didn't rage. I didn't call her. I didn't send a "what is this" message that she could screenshot and frame as insubordination. I forwarded Priya's confirmation to myself in a secure note. I saved the document history view. I prepared a short, factual summary. Timestamps only, no adjectives. Then I got a calendar invite. Compliance review, payout incident controls. Security was on it, finance was on it, and legal was added as optional. And then my phone buzzed with a message from Nolan. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer, because I finally understood the real leverage. If I spoke like an injured employee, they could manage me. If I spoke like an auditor with evidence, they had to respond. And the next meeting wasn't going to be about how I felt. It was going to be about who pressed the button, who tried to rewrite the record, and why my manager thought I'd quietly accept it. By the time the compliance invite hit my calendar, the building had already decided something was wrong. You could feel it in the way people typed. Shorter messages, fewer jokes. Nobody wanted their name attached to the wrong thread. I walked into that review call with one goal: keep it factual, keep it clean, and don't let anyone turn this into a personality contest. The attendee list was heavier than it should have been for a process review. Security, compliance, finance, my director, and legal, no longer optional. Nolan joined 2 minutes late, still calm, still polished, like he was stepping into a panel interview. Claire joined right after him, muted, camera on, looking like she'd already rehearsed an apology she didn't want to say. Compliance opened with a simple statement. "We are not here to assign blame," the lead said. "We are here to establish a correct timeline and assess control failures." That's corporate language for, "We already know someone lied." Security shared their screen. No opinions, just logs. A timeline appeared. Token issuance, pipeline trigger, deployment start, incident onset. The compliance lead asked, "Who initiated the emergency access token?" Security answered, "Nolan." Nolan smiled slightly, like he expected to talk his way through it. I used it to mitigate a known reliability risk. Compliance didn't react. Why was the justification field blank? Nolan's smile held, but his eyes flicked. I moved quickly. It was late. Security zoomed in. This control exists specifically because it's late when people make poor decisions. The field is mandatory in policy. Legal spoke for the first time. Policy isn't a guideline. Nolan shifted in his chair. The calm was still there, but it was thinner now. Compliance continued. Was there a release freeze at the time? Operations replied, yes. Quarter-end freeze. Compliance. Did you have approval to bypass the freeze gate? Nolan said. The severity justified immediate action. Compliance didn't let him broaden it. That's not the question. Did you have approval? Nolan paused half a beat too long. Not in writing. That tiny sentence changed the temperature of the room. Then security brought up the pipeline run, manual trigger, freeze gate bypass, actor identity. It was not automated, security said. This was initiated manually under Nolan's credentials. Nolan tried a new angle. The service owner is responsible for preventing unsafe changes. And there it was again, his favorite trick. Make ownership sound like authorization. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just spoke like I was reading a report. I told Nolan not to deploy during freeze, I said. I directed him to open an emergency change if he believed it was necessary. I did not approve a bypass. I was not in possession of the emergency token. Security has already confirmed I am not listed as an approver. Security nodded. Correct. Silence dropped. Not awkward silence. Consequent silence. Then compliance pulled up the postmortem draft. We also need to address record integrity, they said. This document contained language implying authorization by the service owner. Legal asked, who added that language? The document history came up on screen. Claire's name sat there, time-stamped, in the revision log like a fingerprint. Claire unmuted. I was trying to close the postmortem quickly. Leadership wanted accountability. Legal's tone stayed flat. Accountability requires accuracy. Claire swallowed. I assumed Nolan had approval. Compliance asked, assumed based on what? Claire hesitated. That hesitation was the whole story. Because there was no approval. There was only trust in Nolan's confidence, and willingness to treat my silence as consent. Nolan tried to rescue her, which told me he finally understood the danger. This is becoming unfair, he said. We're ignoring systemic issues. The legacy design, compliance cut him off. We're not discussing architecture. We're discussing a controlled process bypass that caused financial exposure. Finance spoke next. We are currently estimating exposure and credits at approximately 1.2 million. No one reacted to the number out loud, but you could hear it land. That wasn't a metrics chart. That was real money, real clients, real consequences. Legal asked Nolan, did you understand that the deduplication layer impacts payout authorization behavior? Nolan said, yes. Legal. Did you validate the change under production-like load? Nolan's throat moved. Not fully, security added, and you deployed without peer review. Nolan tried to smile again. It didn't work this time. It was a small change. I couldn't help it. I felt a sharp, quiet satisfaction. Because the system didn't care that he called it small. The logs didn't care that he sounded confident. And the people in that room didn't care where he went to school. Compliance ended the call with immediate actions. Emergency deploy permissions revoked for Nolan pending investigation. Break glass access policy tightened. Freeze gate bypass disabled, except under documented security incident procedures. Postmortem rewritten with verified timeline. Audit package prepared for external reviewers. Then legal added one more sentence that felt like the door closing. Nolan, you are instructed not to access production systems or internal repositories until further notice. Nolan's face finally changed. Not anger, not embarrassment, fear. After the call ended, my director messaged me privately. Stay available. Do not discuss this in public channels. Claire didn't message me at all. Nolan did. You think you won, he wrote, but you just made enemies. I read it once, then archived it with the rest of the evidence. Because that was the moment I realized something. He still thought this was a game, and I was done playing. The next morning, security scheduled another call. Smaller, closed door. Subject line: access review and administrative actions. And for the first time since the night of the incident, my breathing slowed. Not because I trusted the company, because I knew the truth was already written, time-stamped, verified, and impossible to edit away. The access review call lasted 11 minutes. No speeches, no debate. Just a list of decisions read in a tone so neutral, it almost sounded merciful. Nolan's credentials were disabled across production, code repositories, and internal tooling. His emergency deploy privileges were permanently revoked. He was placed on paid administrative leave pending investigation. And compliance formally flagged the incident as a control breach with financial exposure, meaning it wasn't something leadership could coach through anymore. When the call ended, my apartment was quiet. The adrenaline I'd been living on for days finally drained out of me, and for the first time since the outage, I didn't feel like I was standing on a trapdoor. I felt steady. Over the next week, the company moved the way companies move when they're scared of paper trails. Finance finalized the reconciliation. Most duplicate payouts were blocked or reversed before settlement. A smaller portion cleared and had to be recovered through client coordination and credits. The final exposure was still ugly, close enough to 1.2 million that nobody tried to argue semantics anymore. But it wasn't catastrophic. What mattered was the record. The postmortem was rewritten from scratch, this time owned by compliance. It included a verified timeline, security artifacts, and the exact control failures. Emergency access used without justification, freeze gate bypassed, peer review skipped, insufficient validation, and an attempt to publish a document that implied authorization that did not occur. My name was not in the authorization section, it was in the remediation section. That distinction saved my career. And it didn't happen because anyone suddenly became fair. It happened because logs don't get tired and screenshots don't forget. Nolan tried one last move, the private apology that isn't really an apology. He emailed me from his personal account. He wrote that he respected my dedication, that he moved too fast, that he didn't anticipate the system behavior, and that he hoped we could reset when things cooled down. I read it twice and realized what wasn't there. No ownership of the bypass, no acknowledgement of the blame shift, no mention of the postmortem edits, no apology for mocking me in front of people. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry it left evidence. I didn't respond. A few days later, his Slack profile went inactive. The company announcement was short and sterile. Nolan had separated from the organization. No details, no drama, just a clean exit so leadership could act like the mess never belonged to them. But inside engineering, everyone understood. Emergency controls are the last line between confidence and catastrophe. You don't break them, cost the company a 7-figure hit, and then try to rewrite the record. Not in fintech. Not during audit season. Claire's outcome was different. It had to be. Companies rarely treat managers the same way they treat individual contributors, especially when the manager's mistake is misjudgment instead of action. So she didn't disappear overnight. Instead, her authority did. She was removed as postmortem owner, then quietly pulled off people management. She was reassigned to special projects under another director. Her performance cycle suddenly included the kind of language managers use to end careers slowly. Judgment, risk awareness, record integrity. She booked a one-on-one with me after everything settled. Her face looked older than it had a week earlier. "I didn't mean to put you in that position," she said. I kept my voice calm. "You edited the document to imply I approved something I didn't?" She flinched. "I assumed." "That's the problem. I said, still even. You assumed confidence was the same as permission. She nodded slowly like she wanted me to soften it for her. I didn't. I didn't insult her. I didn't threaten her. I just let the truth sit between us without padding. I won't be signing a story that isn't true, I said. Not now. Not ever, Claire swallowed. Understood. And that was it. No redemption scene. No dramatic apology. Just a manager realizing she'd tried to use the quiet guy as a shock absorber. And the quiet guy had stopped absorbing. 2 weeks later, my director asked me to lead the remediation program. Not as a favor, not as a reward, as an operational necessity. We implemented 2-person approval for break glass access. We tightened freeze enforcement so it couldn't be bypassed by a single engineer. We added automated checks for idempotency logic changes and forced staged rollouts with load testing gates. We also required postmortems to be reviewed by compliance before publication if they involved emergency controls. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was the kind of work that prevents the next incident from being someone else's career-ending surprise. At the end of the quarter, I got a compensation adjustment and a new title that looked good on paper. People congratulated me like the system had been fair. I thanked them politely. But the truth was simpler. I didn't get rewarded for being right. I got rewarded because the company needed someone they could trust to tell the truth when truth was inconvenient. A month after the incident, I took a day off and did something I'd been putting off for years. I updated my resume, not out of anger, out of clarity, because I'd learned something I couldn't unlearn. When things get expensive, loyalty becomes negotiable. And if your manager is willing to edit a document to protect a well-regarded engineer, then the place isn't stable. It's just quiet until the next fire. I interviewed with a smaller firm, still regulated, still serious, but with a culture where process wasn't treated like cowardice. They asked me why I was leaving. I didn't tell them the dramatic version. I told them the honest one. I prevented a false record, I said, and I realized I don't want to work somewhere that tries to create one. They hired me. My last week at the old company, I walked past the same conference room where Nolan had mocked my degree. Someone else was presenting inside, laughing at their own joke, and for a second I could almost hear that old line again, spreadsheets with feelings. I didn't feel embarrassed this time, I felt calm, because now I understood what that degree really represented. Not prestige, not status. Proof that I could learn the hard way and still build something that holds. And when someone tried to make me small to cover their mistake, I didn't explode. I didn't beg. I didn't posture. I documented. I verified. I escalated correctly. And I let the system do what it always does when you stop arguing and start proving. It remembers.